They are, yes. The oral communication, the way it goes to this, I'm sure you've heard of the SLAR meeting, SLAR, Subject Learning Assessment Review. In effect, it's like a department having a mini conference. So what happens is, when the oral communications have been done in class, the teacher will take 4 examples. You will record them. 4 examples. You try as best you can to get an example of a yet to meet expectations, another of in line with expectations, above expectations, and an exceptional. The department then, each person brings their 4 samples to the table. There is a facilitator and there is training available for facilitators of that meeting. The facilitator then will act as facilitator for the group and will attempt to get a consensus, a standard, exactly as happens at an exam conference, and the teacher then will award descriptors and maybe even amend in line with the collegiate viewpoint. The same thing will happen with the collection of texts, and Tomas just showed you the dates for them. The latest date for a student submitting their 2 texts. Now remember, we have the folder there for their 4 best, their little masterclass. From that, with your guidance, they'll take their 2 best. The latest date for submission of those to the teacher is the 2nd of December. The teacher then takes those submitted texts and allocates each student a descriptor. Then the teacher brings some samples of the text to the subject learning assessment review meeting, and once again the facilitator facilitates a discussion of the standards and the descriptors, and everyone arrives at consensus. Those descriptors then are kept, which will be eventually placed in the junior cycle profile of achievement. What happens with the assessment task then, and you have the dates up there, the department, the NCCA rather, will send out the assessment task. It will be over 2 class periods. The first period is a digital text. The student will listen to that digital text and then will answer some comprehension questions on it. You can see some examples on Curriculum Online, the website we showed you at the beginning. The second half of the assessment task is where the student has beside them the text that they wrote, their best texts. And in the questioning, they get something like, write a paragraph explaining what you learned about writing in the course of the last 2 years. And the student may say something like, well, I wrote a short story and my teacher explained to me that 2 of maybe the best endings of short stories might be something like my own favourite, Frank O'Connor's Guests of the Nation. Do you know the closing paragraph where he says, I stood and I looked at the stars and I listened to the shrieking of the birds dying over the bogs, and I felt like a child, very lost and lonely, astray in the snow, and anything that happened to me afterwards, I never felt the same about again. And it's a profound and very reflective moment. And if we could get students, and never mind ourselves, to write in that way, with that kind of reflection and profundity and solemnity at the end of a short story, we'd have done a very good job of teaching. Or the student might say, well, look, I learned a clever twist in the tale by reading The Landlady, and at the end, when the guest says, have there really only been 2 guests in this guest house over the last 2 years? And by the way, they're both dead. And she says, no, my dear, only you. So I learned something about twist in the tale. Now the student then might say, and here was my lovely ending, and they will write their paragraph. That goes to the department, and that's the 10%.